Hey, everybody. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Welcome. It's good to see you all, and it's hard to see you all because there's like really bright lights coming up here, but smile and like wave your hands a little. Okay. Yeah, now we can really see you. Thank you for that. We know you're out there. It's great to see you. Thanks for being with us. I'm Sam. This is Lisa, Ed, and Anna. We'll do a little more intros in a moment. But I wanted to just make sure you're all in the right room. And also wanted to honor the really, I think, beautiful language framing what we're doing here today. So I'm just going to tell you what we're about to talk about. We're about to talk about something we're calling the knowledge paradox. And it has a really juicy question at its core, which is, when does sharing become theft? When does sharing become theft? For decades, the open movement championed sharing as the path to knowledge equity. Billions of works freely accessible and reusable across research, education, and culture. But AI weaponizes that openness. What was built to democratize knowledge now trains models that concentrate power and profit. Open data scraping, closed model development, free content fueling extraction. As we mark Creative Commons' 25th anniversary, we confront a difficult question. How do we keep knowledge open without enabling its exploitation? That's the paradox that we're about to dig into together in the next hour. And when I say together, I mean 4 of us who are sitting up here. I also mean everyone in the room. You may have noticed there's some colorful paper on your chair when you came in. Did you notice that? Yeah, we got 3 colors. We're going to do an activity right now that involves what we're calling red. Perhaps it's more fuchsia, because we're talking about the future. Sorry, that was terrible. And green, and then the blue, which if you have questions you're coming into this session with or thoughts on this paradox, we invite you to use the blue paper to jot them down. If you need a pen, please toss your hand up. Our colleague Laura here is happy. We got a couple hands on the side over here. Oh, wait, I think Fur's got some too over there. Thank you, Fur. Thank you, Laura. And thank you to the whole team making this happen. Please pass those cards once you've written your questions or topics you'd like to discuss. Pass them to Laura or Fur, and we're hoping to bring as many of those as we can into the conversation. So you can do that right now if you're coming in with burning questions or thoughts on your mind. If things come to mind as we're up here talking a bit, you can do it midstream, and we'll make a point to make sure that we get around and collect them again. But we're very curious to hear what folks in the room are thinking. So curious, in fact, that we'd like to put up some statements, and we'd like for you to use your your fuchsia and green cards to indicate whether you agree or disagree with these statements. So here's the first of the statements. This is not it. This is it. There we go. AI, in its current forms, makes knowledge more accessible to more people. If you disagree with that statement, please hold up the red. If you agree, hold up the green. What percentage, what are we at here?
I wanna bring the fuchsias up here and have a little chat.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Definitely majority green there, but with some bursts of fuchsia, especially on this side of the room. All right, let's try another here. Perhaps someone could help me out. Yeah, there we go. AI in its current forms will ultimately harm knowledge production. Okay, majority green, but would you all agree a burst of more fuchsia on that one?
A little bit more fuchsia.
Yeah.
Interesting that we've got back-to-back majority greens, though, here.
Yeah. So it's a yes and, as we often call it at the D School. We're going to do just 2 more. AI, in its current forms, is a tool for unlocking creativity. A little more even, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. And last but not least, AI in its current forms extracts from artists. I saw a couple greens shoot up like before the slide was fully up. Lot of green. Only 2. I'm seeing 2 fuchsias. I'm seeing a mix. This is what I would be using both cards on a lot of things. Really, really interesting. Any quick reflections from our panelists here on those reactions? Surprise,
I think those
confirmation?
first two, though, like that's exactly the paradox. Like it makes things more accessible, but it is ultimately going to change so much.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of when we say paradox, is anyone familiar with the concept of a Venn diagram? Two things that are simultaneously true but can't both be true at the same time. I feel like these, in some ways, these were like Venn diagrams. It's like, these multiple sides of the same thing. And that's really why we called this whole thing a paradox, because there's some paradox within. So, okay, thank you for doing that. I feel like we're a little more in a conversation together already. My name is Sam Seidel. I'm Director of Products and Publications at a place called the Stanford D School. The D stands for design. And we exist to build a world that works better for more people, made by more people, built with human ingenuity, innovation, and innovation. And some of you may have been in this space already. Our team, along with Siegel Family Endowment, has been programming this whole day in this room, including some activities, and we hope you'll stick around after the panel and experience them. But they're all experiential ways to bring you into thinking about what the future looks like, and particularly at the intersections of humanity and technology. So thanks for being here. We have three really, really awesome people, and I don't love panels, but I was so excited about this panel that I talked my way into getting to moderate it, because I just really wanted to talk to these folks about how they're thinking about these issues in this moment. So I'm excited to introduce our panel. On the end here, we have Anna, who is the CEO of Creative Commons. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. In the middle, we have Ed, who's a partner at Pillsbury, Winthrop, Shaw, Pittman, LLP. Yeah. And closest to me, we have Lisa, who's CEO of the Conversation Media Group.
Hello.
So, since we're exploring the paradoxes at the intersections of humans and AI, I wanted to start with something perhaps a little spicy. I don't know, we'll see. I've never done this before and never seen it done. But I thought rather than letting our humans up here speak about how they think about this paradox, I would ask AI how the humans up here think about this paradox, and then let the humans react to what the AI said they would say, and both react intellectually to the statement. How did the AI do in scraping your thinking and putting it into a statement, and also emotionally? Like, how did it feel to have your voice on the panel start with not your own voice, but a voice that is an approximation of your voice? So, never done this before. We'll see how it goes, and the panelists have not seen these yet. Is that true? Did you get to peek at them? Yeah. Okay. So this will be interesting. You're on a journey with us. We're going to put the first one up and just give the panelists a moment. Can we have somebody from the audience maybe read it?
Who's the person who always likes to sit at the front of the class and raise their hand and says, "Yeah, oh, I see one."
We got to volunteer.
Come on.
Fur.
Yeah.
Do you have a mic? Can you pass a mic to our? Oh, there's a mic in the middle. I'm sorry. Great.
Here we go.
Okay, and we're starting with Anna.
You want me to read this?
If you would be so kind, we
Absolutely.
would be grateful. Yes.
AI thinks Anna Tumadoltor would say, openness is non-negotiable. We don't abandon the commons because powerful actors exploit it. We build better tools. Machine-readable rights, AI-specific licenses, data cooperatives that negotiate at scale. Billions depend on open knowledge for education, research, and participation. We don't close the commons, we give it teeth.
Apparently, I'm pretty opinionated on websites that get crawled. That's what I can say about that. It's shockingly on point, probably more eloquent, maybe, than something I would put together. But yeah, it's the we don't close the commons. I mean, we are literally here because it's been 25 years of progress in knowledge sharing and creativity, and we cannot lose that. This cannot have been just this weird couple decade experiment that happened on the web before everything changed. Like we've got to think about how do we make sure that this digital commons continues to exist. So I think it did a decent job. Yeah.
And how did it feel to have your brain approximated by this technology?
Do you want a little bit of like
Ooh, I promised you I'd bring up tissues, and I didn't do it.
Okay.
Yeah. So
little, just like I'll just like play my cards and just give you like a little wave of feminism. There's this article that I recently read, and I'm so bad at remembering these, but if you find me afterwards, I will find the link for you. And it is about sort of women's responses to AI and this technology and seeing what it does that women have done for decades and centuries. And it all comes back to this little concept of the ick, like this feeling you get before you can justify the feeling. And that is a lot of the female responses to this tech. That's why there's lower adoption rates amongst women and sort of more careful interaction with it. And I have to admit that like that is what came when I read it. I was like, oh, this is well written, and I feel mildly nauseous. And yeah, so no tissues needed.
okay.
Maybe one of those bags.
Yeah, the airline bags. Well, thank you for playing along and giving it a try. All right, let's see what AI thinks Lisa would say. Can we have another volunteer? Or perhaps the same volunteer. Sorry. Okay, I'm going to prep. We have one more of these, so I'm going to ask in advance someone else to build the courage and the audacity to jump up. But thank you so much for being willing to do another.
Of course, why not? All right, AI thinks Lisa Watts would say, AI extraction isn't republishing, it's industrial strip mining without attribution or sustainability. We don't need to lock down knowledge, we need mandatory transparency, attribution, and contribution back to the institutions producing quality content. If AI profits from expert verified knowledge, it must help sustain the sources.
Thank you.
Agree. Yeah, no, that's good. I think that I also have a little bit of ick, just to sort of give an emotional response as well. There's always something slightly declarative or something that's sort of so kind of sure of itself that feels a bit disingenuous. But look, I'd be happy with that. I would probably want to add in a little bit more humanness somehow. I'm not quite sure how. But yeah, I think in terms of the substance, I think AI, green card, the future's bright. There's so many there's so much incredible opportunity for advancement. And you can see it in terms of diagnostics, and healthcare, and transport, and so many things. But, you know, it seems like, remember in the very early days where you could say, oh, write me a poem in the style of Hemingway, or write me a short story in the style of Raymond Carver, and oh, what a fabulous toy to sort of play with. You know, if you could sort of know now to think, well, that's literally been trained on those works, right. You know, with no consideration for any kind of acknowledgement of the source, payment of the source way. So we've come such a long way in such a short amount of time, realising that if you don't have a way to get back to creators and you let AI at scale steal everything, all human creativity will be, you know, at risk. I really think it's as extreme as that. So, yeah, alarming.
Yeah. Thank you for playing. And last but not least, Ed. Okay, did someone muster up the vim, the vigor to hop up and read Ed's statement?
It's for extra credit. That first student got
Hey,
a plus.
there we
This
go.
is extra credit right now.
Thank you for waving your hand.
You're a good lead. Oh, okay, it's up. AI thinks, see what happens is the pronunciation. Ed Cavazos would say, the problem isn't openness, but a lack of enforceable guardrails for industrial-scale AI extraction. Openness was built for reuse, not opaque scraping that shifts value upward. We need clear rules on provenance, transparency, and contractual and regulatory accountability. This is a governance and market power problem, not a reason to abandon sharing.
Yeah, I think I've never said that. And I'm not sure I would say it exactly that way, but I got the ick too, but in maybe a slightly different way. I heard once a saying, I don't know who to attribute it to, that you know, when someone says, oh, it's a small world, and the response is, really, it's like a small bourgeois clique that we are all in. And I wonder how many people in the world AI would know nothing about what they might say. And when we're doing this exercise, which I think is fascinating, you say, is this a world we're going to where AI knows people, some people, and could actually somehow know us well enough to think that it knows what we say? But for most of the world, if you go somewhere and put the person's name in, my guess it says, I don't know that person at all. So that was a weird thought I had. I'm not sure if it relates, but I thought that was good. This is really interesting. I'd never asked AI what I would say before, and so seeing that there, I don't agree with all of what's there, but it's something close to what I might say.
Are you willing to? Do you want to call out a piece or two that is
I
not
think,
quite on point for you?
So I'm come to this from a slightly different perspective, I think, than my co-panelists on the issue. I think that I'm a First Amendment guy. I have 2 children who are creators, and I very much care about creators. But I believe that learning from creative works and absorbing them and adapting their style to fit what you do is the way we progress the creative arts. And I have some thoughts that we shouldn't stop AI from doing the exact same thing that we are all able to do for free, which is to consume creative works for free. We can't copy them, and we can't sell them, that's copyright, but we can read them, and we can view them, and I can go to a museum and look at 1,000 copyrighted paintings and absorb those styles for myself, and that is the way that our creative legacy as humans has evolved, but we somehow think it's wrong when a machine does that. And so I'm a little bit worried that the rules that would keep a machine from doing that start, like if we were to modify copyright, start also potentially cutting our own ability to do that absorption without paying, and I don't like that. And so some of this may imply that I'm kind of we must keep AI from absorbing information. I'm not completely there. And so that's where I differ a little bit from this.
Yeah, thank you for picking that apart a bit, and it's also kind of heartening that it doesn't know all of us exactly yet.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for playing as well. Before we move to the next portion of our program, any final reflections from any of our panelists on this activity?
The activity is interesting and it's good. I think, in a way, this is a paradox and it's a problem. There is no clear answer. Usually when you're coping with a sort of complicated thing, you have an idea of what the answer should be. You have a sort of a theory or at least a proposition. And I think for me at least, and I don't know for my colleagues here, it's not simple. There is no sort of right way. I think the nuance of thinking about balancing the rights of individuals to retain a sense of agency around their own work, to earn an income, to be acknowledged, to have a sort of prosperous culture, versus scientific advancement, efficiency, huge scale of knowledge being shared at once. That is a balance, and that is a sort of nuanced set of choices. It's not easy.
Yeah, and I think maybe even, when we think about this paradox, it brings me back to a little bit of sort of like Cece's competing origin story, which I'll allow myself to indulge the audience with briefly. And that is just when Cece started, if you talk to folks who were there in the early days, you'll often get flavors of 2 completely different versions of the stat. And it really depends on how they affiliated with or associated themselves with the Creative Commons movement, use of the licenses, et cetera. And so you have the sort of more traditional sort of like open knowledge movement that was like, copyright got in the way of us being able to share things openly, sort of like reuse, remix, build on the knowledge of one another, exactly like you're talking about, whether it's humans or machines, et cetera. And a lot of folks in that contingent are, tell us like, this is the moment we've been waiting for, to some degree. Like this is that at scale. This is like human knowledge collaboration at scale. If we use these as tools, like we can advance scientific discovery, we can translate things into more languages, like this is going to help. Obviously, I'm generalizing. There are, 17,000 different views in our community. But sort of broad strokes, you've got that. But then on the other hand, it's the folks that say, I couldn't decide what was going to happen to the thing that I put on the internet until Creative Commons came along. And then suddenly I could decide to share. I could choose to do something in exchange for attribution, in exchange for sort of recognition that this was originally my work. So like, this was about agency, this was about choice. And those 2 things were not in conflict for quite a while, essentially until AI came along and turned that on its head, and then folks say, we want choice, we want agency, we maybe do not want unfettered reuse and sharing with the machines. We want this to be about sort of like the human collaboration and social contract versus what we have on the other side. And that's what's sort of like interesting when you talk about like, why does it feel different? You know, why is this so different today, and why are our responses so different? So I'm excited for the conversation and also for sort of audience questions and input on this.
Yeah, well, and where you were just going on is right where we're going with the next prompt. So I think I've turned the panel into a game show, I'm realizing, because each of these is like sort of a little bit of a game to play up here. But if someone could help us advance a slide. What we're going to do next, Anna mentioned Creative Commons founding, and what people were thinking then, and sort of how that's changed in this moment. And this next round is all about that. So at the D School, there's an activity we do with our students often called I Used to Think, Now I Think. And I asked each of our panelists to try playing the game and thinking about, it's 25 years for Creative Commons since the founding. Is that accurate? And, these conversations about open source, open knowledge have been going on for decades. A lot has changed in 25 years. A lot has changed in the last 25 months. How has your thinking changed? So each of our panelists has responded and filled in that prompt. And I thought what would be interesting is to put up each of your responses and actually let the other panelists kind of read and respond to what you said, if you're willing to play. So if we could go to the next slide. Okay, we've got Ed's statement first. Would you be comfortable, Lisa, reading it and
playing the role of Ed? I used to think that the internet was the most important technological achievement of my lifetime. Now I think that it may only be remembered for being AI's training set.
Now we need the tissues.
Yeah.
So Anna and Lisa, maybe, Ed, we will give you a chance to jump in here at some point, but maybe you could start by just sharing your reactions to what this brings up around this paradox that we're here to talk about.
I mean, I think that's the question really is, as somebody who still misses GeoCities, I think the old times were better. I think we're all a little bit in that boat, and this idea that this thing that we love and enjoy and have fond memories of, whatever our sort of like entry into digital was, to think that that might just be, like I said, a temporary social experiment that our children will never know, that the future will never really understand. It does make me a bit sad. But then I think about we were chatting about this the other day here with South by, where, every time you come to a South by, someone's like, it's not what it used to be. That one in like 2003, that was the best. Oh, no, it was 97. Oh, no, it was 2011. It's like, the first time you came, that was the best. And so that's, I think, just maybe the human condition to some degree.
Yeah. I've got this, I often say this, I've got this American friend. I mean, I've got many American friends. But I say that when I'm back in Australia. And she's an academic and an artist, and quite a famous artist, actually. And artists somehow are sort of like futurists. This woman is so anti-technology. She was the last person I knew to get a mobile phone. She's got really very little interest in anything to do with AI or the internet. But she knows stuff, and it's 80% right. Like 5 years later, I'm like, Layla said that. Yeah, okay. And so she said to me, we were at this art gallery last year in upstate Massachusetts. She said, one day, pretty soon, all the good information about health, about cures, about diagnostics, about cancer, about stuff that's from experts that you really need to know about that we Google now, Dr. Google, that won't be free anymore. You'll have to pay for that. That'll be from subscriptions, just like Netflix. And, she's right. It's going to happen, right? If you think about AI's training set just being the internet and small I never know how to say it, agentic, iterations of information running off and doing it really well. But we, the consumers, will pay. There's not going to be an ad-supported program for a specific thing that just does health diagnostics for families, for example. So I think that is a bit scary in terms of equity, access, the free flow of information. If it all becomes commoditized and it all becomes something that everyone has to pay for, how many subscriptions can you have? Does it become part of what you get when you sign up as an employee? You know, you get this, you know, you have this many agents as part of your package. I mean, maybe, you know, maybe.
Thank you both. Ed, before we try the next one, yeah, I'll give you the last word if you want it. Do you have?
No, I worry too about the closing of the internet. I was an early internet guy, and for those of you who were around, you may remember that the first online experiences were not the internet. They were CompuServe and AOL and these computer bulletin boards, which were very much pay only. And if you didn't have an account, you couldn't go access that. And that was the entire online world, putting aside some academic stuff that was going on, Gopher and FTPs. But the internet was such a wonderful thing because it came and broke those walls down. And while there are still walled areas of the internet, so much of the internet is available to all of us for free. I think that, you know, AI ingesting and training on all of that, and thus being people's first and only stop to the information. I mean, we already see it if you Google search. Google doesn't just show you the links, but it starts with Gemini's answer. And I will admit that I'm often stop right there, right? I just read the AI. I'm looking for the population of New York. You know, there it is. I don't have to go to a website to see it anymore. That's one way I think, you know, the internet's relevance is being supplanted by AI. But another thing I think is this closing up, because when people start asserting what I think sometimes, and over-asserting the right to control consumption of their work via AI, of the stuff they've put on the internet, their instinct is to close down access to their work, which not only closes down access that the AI has, but that the rest of us have as well, right? And so it's, you know, I worry that that's a phenomenon that's going to couple with internet, you know, I mean, AI just summarizing the results, that's going to keep people from using the internet. They're not, you know, they just, you know, and maybe I'm being nostalgic as an internet guy and thinking that's a bad thing, but I don't think it's a bad thing. I mean, I don't think I'm wrong. I think it is a bad thing that the internet would go away and we would have AI as the arbiter of what the answer is. So, yeah.
I mean, I'm tempted, given your law background, to ask you how we should write the regulations to not have that happen and to make sure that things remain open for those of us who need them, and also that folks feel like they can protect from extraction and exploitation. I know that may be like a life's work and not a panel answer.
I can give you a quick answer.
Yeah, that'd be
I
great.
think part of it is, and remember, I've got creators as kids, so if if you're a creator, and this may come to shocking, I think we need to watch our vocabulary. I've heard exploit, steal, misappropriate, right? I don't believe those words are always the right words. I'm a big believer in fair use. There are rights that copyright owners can't assert for the good of society. And in fact, the creators, before they all turned on AI, were all arguing for their right to write fan fiction and to sample music and to do parody and satire based on other people's works. Those instincts were, hey, I should be able to use people's works to make creative things, and I don't have to pay them for that. And they're right, I think. I think that's the right answer in society. Now, you can't wholesale counterfeit. I think that's a place we should draw a line. But you can remix, and I think we should be able to adapt and make what we call transformative uses of those works. And I just wonder why we stopped with that instinct when it came to AI doing the same thing. Now, look, if AI is spitting out a copy of someone's work, that's an infringement, and someone should be held responsible. The law should not allow that. But on the ingestion side, where it's learning, and it's the same way humans do, I think we have quickly fallen into, well, that's stealing. You can't do that without paying. When humans can do that with your work without paying all the time. And so I think the first thing we need to do is check our instinct that says that that's all wrong at the outset. Some is, but maybe not all of it. So.
I think we'll keep coming back at this tension, so let's keep playing. If we can jump to the next slide, please. All right.
Do I get to be Lisa?
I would be so
Resisting
appreciative.
the urge to experiment with an Australian accent live on stage.
Come on, mate, do it.
Oh, I know better. I used to think society needs free-flowing information to thrive. The internet has democratized knowledge. Now I think AI must be regulated or adopt norms to be forced to pay for the content that it takes to build its products.
Okay, if you, Anna and Ed would discuss a bit, and then we will give you a chance at the end, Lisa.
So very apropos to what we were just talking about, or what I was just talking about. Look, I do think that there's some things that AI does, especially when you talk about it being a product where if it totally misappropriates in the wrong way, that you do need regulation. The law should adapt to give the content owners in those types of scenarios, which I think are not all of them, but some of them, the right to say, no, that's not a transformative use, that's not a fair use, that's just stealing. The way we currently do. But as I've said before, I don't think it's always. I think there's a lot of things that it can do, but I definitely agree that we need free-flowing information to thrive, and I come at the issue from that same starting point, just with a slight deviation at the end of the discussion.
Yeah, and I think it depends sort of on the business model that is being impacted by this moment. So sort of one of our favorite Common Z examples of this is what the Wikimedia Foundation has done with regards to machine reuse of Wikipedia. So it essentially says, hey, humans, you're welcome. Come along, do everything you've always done on Wikipedia. But if it looks like you're a bot, we're gonna gently point you in the direction of this other service we have, which is, you are welcome to our knowledge. The knowledge itself is free. The infrastructure is not free. You cannot hammer our service. You cannot have our SREs working weekends. That's not a fun thing to do for anybody. And so we are going to give you an alternate path to still be able to ingest this, another example of let's not make this a blip. Let's make sure that we protect something as valuable as a crowdsourced multilingual encyclopedia, the only of its kind. But there has to be a sustainability element to it. And so there, obviously, this is a sort of like a volunteer-based knowledge project. This is not something like a news outlet that has a completely different business model that is potentially being impacted. Even similar, we see with academic publishing and the open access publishers, who the whole point has been that you should be able to come and not hit a paywall, not hit a barrier. That knowledge should flow freely. But it costs to keep those things online, and it costs to steward those things, and so on and so forth. So I think there's a lot in the now. I think there should be an element of financial sustainability or financial contribution back to these sources of knowledge, because also it's just a good product idea for the AI labs to do this. You will win if you have the most accurate, up-to-date, relevant information, and if you don't, it's just bad for your product, says the person running a nonprofit and not a private enterprise. But I really think that it's you just won't use that if it's just old, stale, hallucinatory, whatever the case may be. It just loses its value.
Yeah, thank you for grounding it in some examples of what's happening too. I think that's helpful in going from, as thinking about all this, going from abstract to concrete. So thank you for that. Any reactions to hearing your previous ways of thinking and how you're thinking now discussed in this way?
Yeah, I really agree that in a way it's connected, and my thoughts, my now I think is really connected to the sort of thread of the business model, which really, and I'm talking about journalism and the capacity to discover and publish and distribute new knowledge, either reporting or expert analysis or new research, not a whole range of other content that perhaps you could build upon and use as a sort of catalyst for new ideas. But this is not a new problem. I mean, the conversation is 15 years old. We made a decision to publish everything under Creative Commons from the get-go on the basis that we wanted to have for the world a reliable source of quality information that people could trust was human curated by professional journalists, but working only with academics and experts. And that was a gap in the market because it was at that time when newsrooms getting hollowed out, all the sort of very experienced expert journalism journalists who had sort of 20 years doing a health round, that they were the first ones to go because all the money was flowing to the platforms. So, you know, search, social, Google, etc. That was where all the money was gone. So the industry has been under enormous pressure. Then it sort of pivoted to this idea of building really subscription businesses. That's advertising's dead. People now appreciate a brand, they'll pay for it, either if it's a commercial thing through a subscription or for the conversation via a donation, because we're a non-profit funded by philanthropy and other sources. But AI really is a threat to that. And if it wasn't a threat to that, I think there'd be more enthusiasm. So if OpenAI or Perplexity or any of the larger players did more than 27 deals and did it more than just the bare minimum to indicate some sort of good faith efforts, if they'd rolled out a really generous pay-per-call or some sort of model that works, I think people in my industry would be much more optimistic about coexisting. But without that, it's hard to imagine doing anything other than blocking, which is bad.
Yeah. That actually brought up, what you just shared brought up a question I have for the CEO of Creative Commons, which is when everything at the D School that we put out, all of our resources are licensed under Creative Commons non-commercial. Does like commercial AI companies accessing, I'm trying to take your advice, Ed, to not use such maybe negative language. When AI by commercial companies is trained on the material that's licensed as Creative Commons non-commercial use, is that a violation of the licensing or no?
I have such a disappointing answer for you. According to our legal analysis, depending on the jurisdiction you're in, if we say we're in the US, if copyright isn't implicated, then neither are the licenses, because they sit on top of copyright.
I see.
So they never make anything more restrictive than copyright currently does.
Yeah.
And this is also the paradox of sort of the perception of what the licenses were there to do and sort of the spirit of the licenses, the ethos.
Yeah.
And that is literally our work today, is to say, okay, how do you take the spirit of those licenses and make them function in this technological moment? Finding a new sort of legal regime way to do that does not sit on top of copyright, because to Ed's point, I don't want teachers to no longer be able to hand things out in their classrooms. I don't want students to not be able to go into a museum and look at the art and be inspired by it at all.
Right.
But the sort of this perpetual digital sharing and reuse at scale, there just has to be a balance that we bring back to it. We have to think about are the things that we are doing today, are they concentrating more power or are they shifting the boundaries of power? And if we can shift them back towards the public interest, then we're doing the right thing. And there's going to be some uncomfortable trade-offs, I imagine, in that journey, but it's such a delicate balance that we have to try and maintain.
Yeah.
But
Well,
sorry.
I want to
The
thank
short
our
answer is
studio audience
no.
for sitting in on me asking for a bit of like legal advice about all of our D School
From not a
products and
lawyer.
publications. But it is, thank you for sharing that, and I think that gets at the crux of what we're all trying to figure out. Okay, we have another, I used to think, now I think if we could advance to the next slide. Anna, it's your turn to hang out and listen for a moment as your colleagues discuss what you shared.
All right, I guess I'm reading this one? So I used to think there were only a small portion of edge cases that would require conditional access or restrictions when it came to the sharing of knowledge and culture. Now I think edge cases, in quotes, are what we need to solve for, because edge cases will be the contributions that ensure cultural representation and multilingual support in emerging technologies. I agree. Wait, did you write that? Is this the AI one or you? This is you, right?
This is how you know it's not AI, as I use a lot of words.
Yeah.
And not enough commas.
No, I think, look, we've had the law, which is part of this equation, by the way, not all of it. I mean, it's often framed as a legal issue, and certainly there's a very core component of this discussion about what the law should and shouldn't do. But there's also a social norm and social contract discussion here. What do we think is right and wrong, which should inform the law, by the way. And that's the right order. It's like we should determine what we think is the right thing for our society, and the law then should implement the rules to effectuate that goal, right? When we hit technological disruption that is profound enough, the law doesn't have the answers yet. It doesn't have the answers because we haven't come to a consensus about what the answer should be. And laws are not, they don't fall from heaven. They emerge from legislators who arguably are there to represent us, or represent somebody anyway, or from judges who create new precedent on facts that didn't exist. Those are informed, or should be informed, by our by what is right and societal view of what is right. These edge cases are what we need to solve for, because they're the ones for which we don't have good answers under the law, because we don't have good answers in our norms yet, because we don't know what the law should be. Anyone could write the law one way or another. That's not the hard part, right? It's like getting it right is the hard part. And I think what Anna, the real Anna, is saying here is that these ed cases are where all the action is, and it is. It's what we are here talking about, is the edge case, I think. So.
Yeah, and I think the evolution of how we as people think about what the risks are and what the answers are. I mean, something like transparency, where you think, okay, disclosing training data sets. If every AI company was encouraged / forced to do that, list, okay, this is the training data set. I remember in Washington Post in, I think it was 2024, it seems like so long ago now, they published an article where they'd done some research looking at the Google's training data set, CNET4 or whatever it was called. And, you know, you could see where, at the time it was Google and also Llama, I think, Facebook's AI had used in terms of, you know, inputs. And the conversation was in the whole of the internet, the whole of the world, we're 153, I think, which is, we were like, wow, how amazing, how thrilled we are, how important we must be. Isn't that a terrific thing? But now we'd probably be more like, okay, it's invisible. So we don't know, no one knows how much of our content, which is really high quality, we're the biggest non-profit journalism project in the world, it would be used at scale, even though we've got blocks in place. Just doing that would make a big difference to people saying, a bit like nutrition labels, and I know there's movements doing this sort of stuff, but if we all as a society said, we demand that, we expect that, we need to know that, and we'll make a choice about what subscription to pay, or the companies who pay for those subscriptions would, that would be a good social norm to adopt. And I don't know how we start a movement like that, but I think those are the things, and there's probably a bunch of others that we would need to do for those edge cases to become then a norm and then a law. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you kind of teasing out norm from law, and it picks up on what you were sharing, Ed, in an interesting way, right? Some things will happen or may eventually happen legally, and there's also norms that we can create around these issues. You want a last word, Anna, on your I used to think, now I think, and the reactions we've just heard?
No, but okay, so this is something that Ed said earlier when I was talking about the early days of the internet that sort of brings this concept full circle. So you mentioned AOL is like one of the ways to access the internet. So as a, computer nerd, labeled by others because it wasn't cool in the 90s, living in Iceland, when we would get a machine, it would come with a disk for AOL, which did not work. Like, I could not, that was the American internet. Like, that was not what was accessible to us. So it was much more, what I think America subsequently got to experience. But we've almost come full circle back to this idea of sort of country internets or community internets or language internets. That's the thing that's starting to be socialized in a way that is, potentially great from the perspective of cultural preservation and heritage and education and language and so on. And also potentially terrifying, because the beauty of the internet, when the AOLs of the world went by the wayside, is that you could be anywhere in the world in like literally just as long as it took your cranky modem to dial up. Like suddenly you had friends across the world, and like this replaced the pen pals. Remember these chain mails that you used to get, and it'd be like, oh, here's this person in Australia, and somehow they had my mailing address in Iceland. Happened. But like now that was right there, and for people who lived rural, remote, non-English, like there was a whole world that waited for people. And I think that would be such a loss if we found ourselves going full circle to that. And paradoxically, there is something that we have to do to protect our individual cultures and our languages in ways that feels fair and equitable. So like these edge cases, it used to be, you'd be like, oh yeah, cultural heritage collections, absolutely, like let's digitize these, they're in the public domain, everybody deserves to understand their heritage, like let's put these online, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's like these edge cases that are like, not for public consumption, must be contextual, must be with community consent, et cetera. But that is growing. Like for as much as more and more gets digitized, those edge cases is what I mean here. Like that pile is growing, and you can't just casually say we should absolutely use this, because otherwise your big tech and your big content deals, to your point, like that's the sort of overlords that we live in, and they go and they'll take the work of a community and sell it back to them with no benefit back to them for what the work they've put into it. And that's a real tension that inhibits the desire to share, which is the thing that will make us all poorer.
Yeah. I just want to add a point. I think this has been a really interesting conversation, but just as a thought experiment, imagine if we could turn the clock back before they started training the large frontier models and really said, the law says that if you're going to train on this data, you must compensate. First of all, it would be an astoundingly large amount of money that they would have to pay. I imagine a few of them could raise the capital to do that, but they would be the only AI providers because they had enough money to do it. That world of locked up data that only can be ingested means we're willing to reduce AI providers to the very highly capitalized, very rich companies that can provide AI, not allowing startups and independent thinkers and entrepreneurs to train because they don't have the capital. Means that we have very little option as to who we use. Those are the types of things I think we need to think about before we set these laws and say maybe it's not what we thought. Maybe that's not the right. It feels right in a lot of ways after the fact, but what would it really have meant had they had to follow that rule? We wouldn't have open models. We wouldn't have small companies competing with large. We may just have one or two. I'm not sure that's a good output.
An alternative view is that, big or small, people understand, AI companies understand they have to pay for engineers, and they understand they have to pay for the compute, they have to pay for the chips, the sort of infrastructure, the core sort of stuff, but they don't feel they have to pay for the content, the training data. They feel like that is not in the third bucket. And so I think there are going to be ways in which companies, and you can already see that there are some advances being made with getting access to clean, good data sets for training that under an agreement, under a license, and that there'll be more and more ways to, whether it's synthetic data and retraining, there'll be ways to solve for that problem, I think. And I think that would have been preferable from turning back the clock and saying, you're going to start an AI company, that's great. You'll hire some engineers, you'll get your chips and your infrastructure, and you've got to decide what training sets you're going to buy. And here's the arrangements. Now, look, that's obviously, you can't put the genie back in the bottle, but I think we'd be in a better place.
I think that it really depends where in the world you sit when it comes to that view. And one of our biggest concerns at the moment is the potential erosion of sort of public interest exceptions as a shorthand, even if they are not eroded by the law, because to your point, this would still be considered under US courts right now, fair use. Those are being eroded by perception. So these major labs are cutting major licensing deals over here, have massive legal teams fighting lawsuits over here, and then have public campaigns saying this was okay all along over here, not to mention their lobbyist friends over here. So on all fronts, they're hitting this. And so while I agree that in a perfect world, if everybody could use it, that means the opportunity is equal to everyone. Although, to your point, like compute, very expensive, engineers, et cetera, et cetera. But it really isn't, because who has the appetite for that today? Like, if you are just coming in and you've got a good new idea and you think, ooh, like, here's the thing I want to build, and it's like, but I don't have a legal team and I don't have all the money and I cannot pay these licensing deals. So the effect on innovation is arguably already there. There isn't a strong public interest exception for something like research and innovation. And again, your like larger, better funded northern or western research institutions might say, yes, it's cool, we've got this, we've covered. But talent is everywhere in the world, but appetite for legal risk is going to be highly different depending on the jurisdiction you're in or the resources that you have to defend yourself. And so that's why we see this being such a massively uneven benefit across the world. And I just bring that up because the CC licenses work globally the same for humans. So any human anywhere in the world, like it's between, it doesn't matter what country you're in and what country it came from, you know what you can do as a human, but it doesn't tell you what you can do as a machine necessarily. And I think that's also a problem that we need to solve, because there needs to be more equitable footing with regards to this.
I'm so glad we did almost like a bonus round on this last one and got to some of the points.
My face has been there a while. I'm wondering
yes,
if
we can advance to the next slide. We do have one more activity that we put together, another little game to play with the panelists, but I also want to acknowledge we're about 10 minutes out from the end of our time, and I'm curious about getting folks who are here for this conversation into the mix. Laura, do you have some questions from the crowd already? If you haven't written one down but have one now, you write it on any color paper. You can use the fuchsia and green chartreuse to do that. But we would love to get some of those questions into the conversation here. And if there aren't a lot, we can play our last game as well.
I think.
One sentence on the last game while I collect cards.
Okay. Jot those questions. We're going to do a speed round of our last game. The last game is Imaginary Headlines from the Future. Our colleagues at Siegel Family Endowment collaborated with their collaborator, Claude, to imagine 2045 headlines on this topic based on current patterns and trends. If we could go to the next slide, please. This is a snapshot of what my newsfeed might look like in 2045. I invite panelists to pick any of these headlines and just give an initial gut reaction. Laura said it's a 60-second speed round. Is that right? Great. And you've got some questions teed up for us after that? Great. Okay. Let's play.
First AI director nominated for Academy Award, no.
The reaction, it's a one-word sentence, and the sentence is no.
No, let's not do that. Let's just not do that.
I like the AI cooperatives controlling 40% of global cloud computing. It gives me optimism that there's a collective action future for us.
I'm intrigued by Taylor Swift's AI avatar announcing the retirement of her tour. So yeah, it's an interesting visual, but only because, by the way, I believe that much of our entertainment is already AI. We don't even think about, go watch a Marvel movie. Those things flying around weren't real, right? They were generated, and I think we're seeing, in pop culture, despite what most of us feel like, I want real human stuff, we are inadvertently just moving towards valuing AI entertainment the way we view real entertainment, or anime entertainment with K-pop Demon Hunter. These things mix, right? And so I don't know that that's that outlandish to think perhaps it's Taylor Swift's avatar, but I'm not sure there would be a retirement tour because that AI could maybe just keep going.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. What retirement?
Yeah.
If we could jump to the next slide, please. Great. We're going to do as many questions as we can. I don't think we're all obligated to speak to all of them, so maybe like one panelist jump in. If you really disagree and want to toss a different perspective, great. If not, we'll just go to the next and see how many we can do. First question. Do we think, quote unquote, model collapse of no more training data without AI could create new jobs that are providing human expertise as the only way they can be sustainable? If that's your question and you want to wave so we know who sent it in, thank you. Thank you very much.
I think, yes, I do think that, but I also think that'll happen anyway without model collapse. I think there'll be a movement towards, human content being a sort of valuable commodity. And you can already see Our ex-chief scientist in Australia has got a new thing called Proudly Human. There's lots of these emerging where authors can register their novels, their books, their magazines, their content, and people can then explore and certify, voluntary certification. So if people want to just have something that is AI-free, they can choose to do it. And I think more and more people will want that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. Okay, this is a twofer. We're going to read two together. One is kind of crafted as a love letter. Hello, Creative Commons is powerful, but getting the buy-in from outside academia, I'm a professor and an entrepreneur, full-time business owner, is very difficult. Venture capital doesn't care about Creative Commons. How do we keep Creative Commons alive in the age of quote-unquote innovation and platform creation? Thank you, Ashley Kofi. I hope I'm saying the last name right. Kofi, I got it? Coffee, oh, like coffee. Ashley Coffee, thank you, Ashley. And then the accompanying question is, students are asked to cite AI use in written work. Should AI have credit for content? Is the asker of that one out here? Hey, thank you. Thank you for the questions.
I mean, can I just heart emoji the love letter right back and say, how do we stick around? Hey, it's our 25th anniversary. Set up a sustaining donation, she says optimistically. No, but really, this is a really good question. Like, how do we sustain the sort of like the ethos of the commons and these ideas of sharing? Like, what are the things that today would prompt somebody to choose to share versus, the choice that felt a lot easier even just 5 or 10 years ago? I don't know that we are going to bring back, speaking of nostalgia, sort of like the groovy era of like the 9 Inch Nails releasing a CC licensed CD or, Wire throwing us on the cover and so on. It's just like the sort of independent creativity has moved to things like, Patreon and Kickstarter and like other ways to sustain itself online and collaborate. It would be wonderful if we could bring that back or reimagine a different future for that. But I do think thinking of it sort of outside the world of just academia, to your point, and just like how this solves and touches real world problems, the way to sort of mirror open journalism, like the conversation runs with new ways to interact with knowledge, with new ways to sustain these businesses so that this all continues to flow. Like that really is our current work, is sort of reimagining those systems for the future. So we welcome ideas.
Thank you. And there was the other question was around students, whether students should cite AI for work.
Yeah, I'm not sure what they're really citing when they do, because I think the original idea of citation was to show that you've got some authoritative commentator that you're crediting for this idea. And citing AI is like, well, what am I citing? To the points we made earlier, we don't know what was in their training set, and I guess you can cite the chips and the hardware and say that, but that's not the expert. But it's in a similar vein. There's this ongoing discussion about transparency, and I mean, most people's instinct is that it would be great if you use AI, you would tell us, and we would all be informed. And again, I just postulate, what would the world really look like? And it would look like a lot of, we would know a lot about when AI was used. And then I also worry that maybe some people who are not technologically adept would learn to trust that. And when the bad actors don't reveal that they have AI, they're much more prone to be scammed by, the AI. I mean, I would rather a world, and maybe in some ways, where everyone is skeptical now, so that the bad actors don't sneak through this security blanket of transparent, transparency, where everyone says it's AI. I mean, not everyone will follow that rule.
This is not quite answering the question, but it prompted a thought in terms of how do you sort of like cite what AI did or didn't do for your paper if you're a student, for instance. As someone who came to the US from, outside the country and spent a lot of time with my fellow international students, there's a real leg up that people have if something is their native language and that is the one that they are studying in. And this obviously happens in the inverse. If anybody decides to go to the University of Iceland, let me know. But it's how people even perceive your intelligence on the basis of how you can use the language in which you are communicating. The same thing happens if you have any kind of like reading or learning or writing challenge, whatever that may be. And so there is something where I think I've asked myself, like, in the future, would one want to say, like, AI helped me make this more academic? Like, AI helped me remove spelling errors, remove grammatical issues, typos, etc. Today, we don't think that because we've had these grammar checkers and spell checkers and so on. But there's a different sort of editorial process that can happen that some students would have access to because their then native language friends would say, oh yeah, I'll proofread your paper, and they would spiff it up so that it would look completely, the idea is all the same, the logic all the same, the rational, you know, all the citations, etc., but written in just that slightly different way that like this society will then value that more greatly and it will impact that person's life subsequently. And this is something I have no answers for. But I have spent a lot of time thinking about with regards to how do we cite how these technologies are actually helping us not level playing fields, because that's unrealistic, but at least sort of chip away at some of these sort of societal or institutionalized sort of barriers that a lot of people subtly face and may not realize they faced until much later in life.
Thank you for that. I think that's actually a great note to end on. I think we've surfaced many paradoxes. We've posited some perspectives on how we might address or at least think about them. We've definitively answered none. And sorry, I hope no one came thinking you were going to get answers. Our goal is to get you better questions. Thank you for being in the conversation with us. The conversation does not end here when we step off this stage. One, I mean, we're going to still be standing in this room, and we can keep talking. Two, we're programming in this room for the next several hours. So please stick around, have these conversations. This is what Siegel Family Endowment and the D School are here to do. We want to have these conversations in a longitudinal way with you all. So please talk to folks in the room, each other, the folks from Siegel Family Endowment, the folks from the D School, the panelists, as long as they can hang with us. We got to figure this out together. I think that will be my last both enthusiastic statement and also plea. We got to figure this out together. We got to figure this out together. Thank you, Anna, Ed, Lisa, and everyone in this room for being a part of this conversation with us, both in the last hour and as we go on into the future. Thank you.